Hello, horror fans. Welcome to Real Talk Horror. I'm Josh, your guide through the shadowy corridors of horror cinema, where the chills are constant and the thrills never stop. Whether you're a longtime fan of the genre or just beginning to jump into its murky depths, you've come to the right place. Today, we're stepping into the eerie, fog-shrouded world of The Fog, John Carpenter's 1980 supernatural thriller. Now, if you're already picturing ominous clouds rolling in, glowing with sinister light, you are in the right headspace. This film marks a significant moment in our Carpenter series, as it closes out Phase 2 with a bang, or should I say, a spectral whisper. Released in February of 1980, The Fog sits snugly between two monumental Carpenter films, the game-changing slasher Halloween and the dystopian action masterpiece Escape from New York. And while The Fog might not command the immediate recognition of those titles, it's a quietly powerful entry in Carpenter's filmography, one that showcases his mastery of atmosphere and his ability to tell a ghost story like no one else. What makes this film stand out? Well, let me set the stage. The Fog is a story steeped in ghostly revenge, exploring heavy themes like betrayal, guilt, and the sins of the past coming back to haunt the present, literally. But beyond its chilling narrative, The Fog is also a technical showcase for John Carpenter's emerging signature style. The visuals, the pacing, the score, it's all Carpenter at his atmospheric best. So grab your flashlight. Keep an eye on the shoreline and buckle up, because today we're heading straight into the mysterious and vengeful fog that engulfs Antonio Bay. Let's uncover its secrets together. Before we dive headfirst into the ghostly tale of The Fog, let's take a step back and place this film in the broader timeline of John Carpenter's career. So it's the late 1970s. Carpenter has just come off the colossal, game-changing success of Halloween. The film didn't just break box office records, it redefined the slasher genre and established Carpenter as a visionary director who could deliver thrills on a shoestring budget. But with success comes pressure, right? All eyes are on Carpenter to see what he'll do next. Would he stick with the formula that made Halloween a smash hit? Or would he take a risk and venture into new territory? Enter The Fog, a film that takes a different approach to terror. Instead of leaning into the visceral scares of a masked killer stalking babysitters, Carpenter chose to craft a ghost story. A slow-burning, atmospheric horror tale that relies on mood and tension to keep us on edge. And here's the thing about Carpenter. He's not just a director. He's a one-man creative powerhouse. For The Fog, he wore multiple hats. Co-writing the script alongside his longtime collaborator, Deborah Hill. The two were a dynamic duo, with Hill often bringing heart and character depth to Carpenter's tightly wound, suspense-driven plots. But Carpenter didn't stop there. He composed the film's unforgettable score, because of course he did, and he even got involved in the editing process, and as an actor in front of the screen. This is Carpenter in his prime, folks. A true auteur who wasn't just making films, he was crafting experiences that were unmistakably his. With The Fog, he set out to prove that horror didn't need buckets of blood to be effective. Sometimes all you need is a mysterious mist, a haunting backstory, and a master storyteller behind the camera. Now let's dive into the eerie waters of The Fog. This is a classic ghost story with a Carpenter twist. Atmospheric, tightly wound, and packed with tension that creeps up on you like, well, a fog. The story unfolds in a small coastal town of Antonio Bay, a picturesque seaside community preparing to celebrate its 100th anniversary. But just as the clock strikes midnight and the centennial festivities begin, an unnatural fog rolls in. And this isn't your run-of-the-mill mist. It glows ominously, moves with intent, and brings with it vengeful spirits out for blood. These spectral visitors aren't just here for scares. They're seeking retribution for a century-old crime that Antonio Bay's founders would rather leave buried. At the heart of this chilling tale is an ensemble of characters who bring depth and humanity to the unfolding terror. We have Stevie Wayne, played by Adrienne Barbeau, the voice of Antonio Bay. Stevie is a local radio DJ who broadcasts from the isolated comfort of her lighthouse station. She becomes an unlikely hero, using her station to warn the townsfolk about the encroaching danger. Barbeau's performance is magnetic. She's tough, resourceful, and utterly captivating. Nick Castle, played by the incomparable Tom Atkins, a rugged everyman with a charming edge. Nick stumbles into the chaos and quickly becomes a key player in the fight for survival. Tom Atkins brings a grounded, relatable quality to the role, making Nick a character you can root for. Elizabeth, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, as a hitchhiker with impeccable timing or terrible luck, depending on how you see it. Elizabeth finds herself in the wrong place at the wrong time, but Curtis infuses her with a quiet strength that makes her more than just a damsel in distress. And there's Father Malone, played by the great Hal Holbrook, the town's priest and reluctant keeper of its darkest secret. Father Malone discovers a hidden journal that reveals the chilling truth behind the fog and the crimes of Antonio Bay's founders. Holbrook delivers this brooding, introspective performance that really anchors the film's moral and thematic weight. And let's talk themes real quick, because The Fog is much more than that simple ghost story. This is a tale of guilt, justice, and the lingering consequences of past sins. The fog isn't just a spooky weather phenomenon. It's a physical manifestation of the town's collective guilt, creeping in to demand accountability. It's a reminder that the past never stays buried, and that sooner or later the truth will resurface. What Carpenter does so brilliantly here is he uses the fog as both a literal and a metaphorical force, creating a story that's as much about atmosphere and dread as it is about supernatural retribution. And trust me, the result here is haunting in all the best ways. Let's pull back the curtain on The Fog and take a look at what went into crafting this eerie masterpiece. As smooth and seamless as the film feels now, its production journey was anything but straightforward. First off, John Carpenter, ever the perfectionist, wasn't happy with the original cut of the film. After watching it, he felt it lacked the tension and bite needed to truly hook audiences. So what did he do? He went back to the drawing board, reshooting nearly a third of the film. This decision wasn't just about adding more scares, but also about tightening the pace and enhancing the film's eerie atmosphere. Talk about commitment to quality. The budget for The Fog was modest, hovering around $1 million, a shoestring compared to today's blockbuster standards. But Carpenter and his crew were masters of making every penny count, and one of the standout achievements was that fog itself. It's not just a backdrop here, but practically a character in the story. The team used creative practical effects such as fog machines, backlighting, and carefully timed camera work to give the mist a life of its own. Watching it roll in, glowing ominously, feels almost supernatural, even though it was all achieved with old school techniques. And a huge part of the atmosphere comes courtesy of cinematographer Dean Cundy. And if you're a Carpenter fan, you've seen his work in Halloween and in The Thing. Cundy's mastery of lighting and shadow adds layers of unease to every frame. Whether it's the soft, foreboding glow of the fog or the stark contrast between light and dark, Cundy's work here is visually unforgettable. Then there's the cast I talked about. Carpenter brought together the mix of familiar faces and fresh talent to bring Antonio Bay to life. Now, despite all of its challenges, the production of The Fog is a testament to Carpenter's ability to adapt, refine, and deliver a film that punches well above its weight. This is a masterclass in turning constraints into creative opportunities, and the results speak for themselves. If there's one thing that sets John Carpenter apart in the world of horror, it's his unmistakable style. And in The Fog, his signature touch is on full display. So let's try to break it down piece by atmospheric piece. First up, the pacing. Carpenter is the king of the slow burn. He never rushes to deliver scares. Instead, he carefully builds tension. He allows the dread to seep into every corner of the story, and The Fog showcases this technique. From the opening moments where we hear the ghostly warning of the campfire tale to the creeping sense of inevitability as the fog rolls in, Carpenter keeps us on edge. And it's not just about jump scares. It's about this oppressive atmosphere that lingers with you. And then there's the music, because no discussion of Carpenter's style is complete without giving his scores the spotlight they deserve. The man isn't just a director, he's a composer, and a phenomenal one at that. The synthesizer-heavy soundtrack for The Fog is hauntingly simplistic. Tracks like the main theme are hypnotic. They blend melancholy and menace in a way that's instantly recognizable as Carpenter. And the music here doesn't just complement the visuals, it elevates them and creates an immersive experience that really pulls us into this eerie world that is Antonio Bay. And those visuals, they're pure Carpenter magic. As we've mentioned in the other films we've done already, he is a master of wide shots and deliberate framing. And this is no exception. The expansive views of the town and the coastline emphasize isolation, and it makes you feel like there's no escape. The fog itself, creeping, glowing, and alive with malevolent intent. Carpenter using backlighting to make the mist shimmer and pulse, and give it this otherworld appearance and presence that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. For me, what's especially impressive is how Carpenter combines all these elements into a cohesive whole. The deliberate pacing, the chilling music, the atmospheric visuals, they're all working together to create a film that becomes more than the sum of its parts. The Fog isn't just a story about ghosts, it's a sensory experience. It immerses us in a world where the past refuses to stay buried, and the mist hides horrors you can't quite see, but you can definitely feel them there. This is Carpenter at his most atmospheric, proving once again that he doesn't need over-the-top effects, rapid pacing, any of that to create something unforgettable. Instead, he's able to rely on mood, precision, and his unparalleled ability to make you feel like terror is creeping in from just outside of the frame. And by the time you realize it's there, it's already too late. When The Fog first rolled into theaters in 1980, I think you can guess what we're going to say next. It wasn't exactly met with open arms by critics. Many dismissed it as a step down from Carpenter's genre-defining hit Halloween. But as with so many great works of art, time has been kind to The Fog. What once flew under the radar has risen to become a classic, celebrated for its atmosphere, craftsmanship, and the haunting questions it raises about morality and justice and the sins of the father. Let's talk about its influence. While it didn't make the same cultural splash as Halloween, it wasn't as jaw-dropping in effects as The Thing. The Fog quietly paved the way for a wave of supernatural horror films throughout the 80s. Its success proved that horror didn't have to be loud and gory to make an impact. It could be subtle, creeping, and deeply unsettling. Movies like The Poltergeist and The Others owe a tip of the hat to Carpenter's eerie execution here. The film's central themes, reckoning with the sins of the past and the inescapable nature of guilt, have aged beautifully. In today's world where historical injustices and societal reckonings are front and center, The Fog feels more relevant than ever. Antonio Bay's ghosts aren't just vengeful spirits. They're manifestations of collective guilt, a reminder that what we bury will eventually rise to the surface. And then there are the iconic moments. Who can forget the fog slowly swallowing Stevie Wayne's lighthouse, its glowing tendrils slinking through the night like a living entity? Adrienne Barbeau's voice crackling over the airwaves, desperately trying to save the townsfolk while she's trapped in her own isolated nightmare. It's horror perfection. Or the climatic showdown in the church. It's classic Carpenter. The oppressive fog closing in, the spectral sailors looming ominously, and Father Malone confronting the sins of the past head on. It's this moment that blends terror and redemption and just lingers with you. It sits on your chest kind of after the screen goes dark. What makes The Fog truly special, again, like so much of Carpenter's early work specifically, is its staying power. It's not just a film, it's an experience with the eerie visuals, the haunting score, and the rich themes combining to create something that feels timeless. Today, it's celebrated by fans, filmmakers, and academics alike as a showpiece in atmospheric horror. John Carpenter's legacy as one of the great horror auteurs was already well established, just with Halloween by itself. But The Fog holds a unique place here. It's quieter, it's more meditative entry in his filmography, but it's one that reminds us why his work resonates so deeply. He doesn't just scare us. He really makes us think. And isn't that what great horror is all about? When The Fog first rolled into theaters in 1980, as with almost all of Carpenter's films, it received decidedly mixed reception. Critics weren't quite sure what to make of it. On one hand, some praised the moody atmosphere and Carpenter's ability to craft a sense of creeping dread. On the other hand, others felt it didn't deliver the outright scares they'd hoped for, especially following the pulse-pounding terror of Halloween. But here's the thing about The Fog. It's a film that rewards patience. It may not have grabbed the spotlight immediately, but over the years, it has quietly but firmly staked its claim as a hidden gem in Carpenter's filmography. As horror fans and scholars and critics have revisited Carpenter's work, The Fog has been reevaluated as a sophisticated exploration of supernatural horror. It's not about cheap thrills, it's not about gore, it's about atmosphere, storytelling, and a moral reckoning. The film's deliberate pace and focus on mood may have felt understated in 1980, but today those qualities stand out as strengths. Its themes of betrayal, guilt, and retribution feel more poignant than ever. The story of Antonio Bay's dark secret and the vengeful ghosts it summons strikes a chord in a modern world where we're constantly confronting the sins of the past. The ghosts of the fog aren't just scary, they're symbolic, forcing both the character and the audience to grapple with the consequences of buried truths. What also makes The Fog unique is the way it offers a different kind of horror compared to Carpenter's other classics. While The Thing shocks with visceral body horror and Halloween keeps you on edge with relentless suspense, The Fog makes a subtler approach. It's about the unease of what you can't quite see, the way the fog obscures, distorts, and hides. It's a slow creeping terror that gets under your skin and stays there. And let's not forget the modern appreciation for Carpenter's craftsmanship. Audiences today recognize the brilliance of his visual storytelling, his synthesizer scores, and the way he turns a small budget into big scares. The Fog may not have been an immediate critical darling, but time has proven it to be ahead of its time, hauntingly reminding us that sometimes the scariest things are the things you can't see coming. When I think of The Fog, one scene immediately stands out. The fog itself, glowing with an eerie, supernatural light as it's creeping into Antonio Bay. It's haunting, almost hypnotic, the way that it perfectly captures the film's tone. This isn't just weather. It's an unstoppable, malevolent force. The way the fog slithers through the town, swallowing up everything in its path, is pure visual poetry. Carpenter's cinematography, paired with the score, works perfectly in harmony to evoke a growing sense of dread. But if we break down the scene a bit more, as the fog rolls in, Carpenter uses those wide shots to emphasize its scale and inevitability. The way it moves, slow, purposeful, feels alive and predatory. And then there's the lighting. The fog's glow contrasts beautifully with the darkness of the night, making it both mesmerizing and terrifying. It's a brilliant example of how Carpenter uses these visuals to do more than just set the stage. They tell a story of their own. But what really sets The Fog apart is its tone, because here Carpenter doesn't rely on gore and thrills or jump scares. Instead, he builds an atmosphere so thick you can almost feel it pressing you down. Every creak of a door, every flicker of a light, and every note of the minimalist score adds to the tension. This is the top of the line in slow burn horror. The kind that doesn't just scare you in the moment, but lingers with you when you leave the theater or turn the lights back on. This oppressive atmosphere is a hallmark of Carpenter's style. But The Fog takes it to this whole other level. Few directors can convey isolation and foreboding as effectively as he can. Antonio Bay feels like a character in its own. It's this town shrouded in secrets. It's cut off from the rest of the world by the very fog that threatens it. Another aspect worth discussing briefly is the film's restraint. Carpenter doesn't show you the vengeful ghost right away. Instead, he lets the tension simmer. He allows your imagination to fill in the blanks. And when the ghosts do appear, their spectral presence feels earned, a payoff to the film's carefully constructed sense of dread. In many ways, The Fog is a love letter to old-fashioned ghost stories around the campfire. It's not about the body count the blood and gore. It's about the lingering unease, the feeling that something is out there, just beyond the edge of the light. And that's what makes The Fog so unforgettable. It's not just a horror movie. It's an experience, one that pulls you in to its eerie embrace and does its best to not let go. So what are my thoughts? The Fog may not be the loudest or flashiest entry in John Carpenter's filmography, but it's an essential part of what makes his work so enduring. This is Carpenter at his most atmospheric, using every tool at his disposal to create a supernatural horror experience that lingers like The Fog itself. The slow burn storytelling, haunting visuals, the eerie soundtrack all make it a standout, not only in his career, but in the broader sense of supernatural horror as a whole. For me, I give The Fog a solid 8 out of 10. This is a film that rewards patience, pulling you into its ghostly embrace with rich themes of guilt, betrayal, and justice. If you're a fan of ghost stories, atmospheric horror, or Carpenter's signature style, this is a must-watch. But not only that, this is a film that if you don't like horror, you have someone that doesn't like horror movies, this is a great entry point. It's atmospheric, it's eerie, it's creepy, but there's nothing there for the non-horror fan. There's nothing there to stick to. There's nothing there to latch on to and say, that's what I don't like. This is just good atmospheric thrill. It's a reminder that horror doesn't always have to be about gore and jump scares. Sometimes it's about the creeping dread of what lies just out of sight or just in your imagination. And speaking of Carpenter's signature style, I hope you're ready for our next film. Next week, we're diving into They Live, the sci-fi horror classic with sharp commentary on consumerism, conformity, and control. This one's going to kick off phase 3 of our Carpenter series, and I don't think you're going to want to miss this one. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Real Talk Horror. If you enjoyed our deep dive into The Fog, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. If nothing more, it puts a smile on my face. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk for updates, maybe some behind the scenes content, or just to share your thoughts on The Fog. Did it chill you to the bone or leave you cold? I'd love to hear your take. Until next time, stay spooky, my friends, and remember, the past is a way of creeping back when you least expect it.